There's a lot of new stuff that I haven't really been talking about. I've been in research and discovery and introspection and kind of like trend watching and looking at what's coming next in the entrepreneurial space. And there's some cool shit going down. And you know, the benefit to this really is I want to send you guys home with like stuff that's making you think about what happens in your business next, and really I think what puts you on the leading edge, on the cusp of or ahead of the curve of what's going to be coming. And you know, my bias is kind of the philosophy and consciousness based, so there's going to be a lot of that, but there's also going to be some other kind of more structural stuff as well. So this is really light, it's easy. There's all this artifice because we're recording, but it doesn't need to be like that serious, so this is going to be a hangout. Anybody have any questions? Anything, clarity, anything you want to know, need to know? Cool. I'll ask one of my typical questions to start then. What's interesting to you guys in this? So if there's needs, if there's desires, if there's specific things that you're looking for, I can make sure that I'm dropping that in at the right moment as we're going through. So if it's just me, Matt the talking head, I mean, I love the talking heads, but that's a different story. I also tell lots of bad jokes, so there's that. So what would you love to get out of this? Is there things that you're specifically interested in knowing about?
I'm excited that as I'm keeping my head down, you're looking ahead to see what's coming.
Yeah.
And I'm super grateful for that.
Yeah, it's the symbolism of having a house and an office that's really high up that I can see really far has not been lost on me for like the amount of forecast vision that I've been putting into this kind of stuff. So there's interesting internal, external kind of mirroring things happen. Yeah, V.
I don't know if it's just me, but there's something in the field where it feels like things are really changing rapidly.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing it in my business, like just ending things that are just don't feel aligned, but it kind of feels like there might be something collectively going on, especially for those of us who do this type of work.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear if you're picking up on that and maybe what that might be.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I'll say, and this will probably come up again later, in a sense, time is moving faster than it's ever moved. And there's implications to that, not just in a linear fashion, but in a non-linear fashion that is a calling forward, and I'm sure that's what you're feeling. And add that into something's got to change, and all of a sudden there's, you know, a real feeling of what entrepreneur means in a vastly different way than what it was a year ago, 5 years ago. Yeah. Who else? Anything? Anyone else? I also love to do the annoying thing of asking a question and then just waiting until someone says something. My fave. So, this is an interesting time to be a human. This is an interesting time as an entrepreneur. It's an especially interesting time if you have any spiritual awareness and you're kind of tracking what's going on your own energetic experience and the kind of energetic and spiritual planes in the space around us. And I think now more than ever, it's hard to ignore all of these other aspects of what's happening in business. If you are just staying in the linear, rational, reductionistic mindset, life's getting tougher and tougher because there's more and more intensity and more chaos happening in the world around us. And as that adds to more complexity and more intensity, people are looking for solutions to answers or to questions that they don't even know that they're asking. There's all this kind of confusion and chaos going on, and there needs to be ways to think about it and ways to experience it as an entrepreneur that just honestly have not existed on the planet yet. We are in an evolutionary moment, and so it's an awesome time. Any time of chaos is an awesome time to make big radical shifts and have big success personally and in business, and it's also a time for just tracking what's going on, and can be easy to kind of lose yourself in that. If anyone else has been feeling like V has been feeling that time feels like it's getting faster and it's also harder to do things. It feels like the resistance is going up. It's because we've got to manage more data and more input now than we ever have in any other period in history. So the demand for who we are as humans is big, and it's real, and the world needs it, and the world needs us. And in this contemplation that I've been in for the last 6 months or so, I've continually come back to, is entrepreneurship really like where I'm going to make my mark? I'm recognizing all the things that are happening in the world around us. We need some real solutions real fast. And there's lots of places that we can play in that. Tech is obviously going to be huge. Emerging spirituality is going to be huge. Helping create even more equality and environmental sustainability are huge markets. These are all things that need massive help. And the truth of it is, I fucking love being an entrepreneur. It's just the best. It's so fun, and there's so much possibility. So as I looked historically at what being an entrepreneur has meant, I realized that there is a radical evolution that has to happen in that title to come up to speed and then to start to lead what is happening in the world around us. You know, if we really are going to make it out of this window of precarious walking around the ledge of what's happening in the world, then we need leaders. And I believe the entrepreneur is really specifically and uniquely positioned to be at the cutting edge and the leading edge of that, making a big difference. So that's basically what we're going to be digging into a little bit tonight. The first part of this is going to be kind of backing up most of what I just said, giving some context and some background. And then the second part is I'm going to share one of the ways that I've taken all this and I'm going to be applying it in my business moving forward. So there's going to be opportunity for, I mean, I've talked with a number of you, there's things coming that some of you may want to take part in. And I also want you to know that this isn't a pitch. This isn't a, hey, come buy my stuff. This is a, I love all of you, and we've made significant energy, financial, emotional investments in each other. And you are all the people that I really felt like soul connected to enough to say like, hey guys, this is what's coming next. And this is going to be a really cool way to get this out into reality. So I'll be talking about that again. It's just as an example. And there will be some people that say, oh shit, I want to be a part of that. And that's great too. Cool? Awesome. So where are we? Presently, in the world, we have a rapidly and radically complexifying future across all vectors with insufficiently complex or disintegrated siloed solutions. Meaning we have a whole bunch of problems and insufficient complexity and intelligence to actually address those problems. We have an environment that's literally breaking around us. We have social, cultural, familial, structural breakdown with no way to address it. And at the same time, we have an intelligence building, but the problems and the solutions are having a really hard time talking to each other. There's the rise of an integral consciousness with insufficient integral infrastructure to address that. I'll be talking about what that means. Most of you know what that means, but I'll be giving a little bit more concrete example in just a minute. We have an inevitable technological singularity in the next 30 years, 35 years. And that means artificial intelligence, cyborgs, which is humans with technology on board as part of their natural way of being, and radical life extension. So what happens to this planet if everyone goes from living from 70 years to 200 years? What happens to our resources? What happens to our social structure? What happens to our way of being? What happens to the idea of retiring at 65? What happens to employment, period? There's so much that radically changes when that starts to shift. We have massive disconnection from the environment and imminent environmental collapse. We have a culture that's primarily cognitive dominant, meaning mind focused first, with more and more emotion coming online, but still emotional intelligence is not nearly where it needs to be to actually meet the demands of the amount of cognition that's happening. And we have a whole lot of closeted spiritual people who need to get their soul up and out and be leading with that and really have that be the front end of who they are. And it just hasn't felt safe for most of those people. We have a 30 to 35 year timeline before an impossible to understand shift. And I've been watching this. We'll go through a couple examples of this tonight. Basically, singularity, which is a radical shift in technology. AI is likely to be a big part of that. The research says 30 to 35 years, we're looking at that as an inevitability. When that happens, if there is a consciousness on the planet that vastly supersedes ours and is able to lead us to a place that we haven't been, we literally can't understand now what that would look like and what the world's going to look like. So we have a future, potentially 30 years from now, we have no idea what's going to happen. That's crazy. That's crazy to think about. That has literally never happened in history as we know it. It's also crazy exciting. I mean, what's possible is huge. And we have, I believe, some big responsibilities between now and then in order to make sure that that's a benevolent shift. In that same time frame, we have many of the environmental reports say we're kind of like on the point of no return, and 30 to 35 years is when we're going to start to see some of the things happening now really start to take hold and really start to be major players in the actual experience of people's lives. So I don't want to turn this into a bum out fest. That's not what this is meant to be. This is both a little bit terrifying and super exciting at the same time. And there's no place really to be in the ignorance of this anymore. I mean, we all have grown up with environmental concerns as something that's been part of the conversation for quite some time. And what a lot of the research that I've been reading recently has been saying is that most of the historical research that's come out up into this point has actually been suppressing, not intentionally in some sort of conspiracy theory sort of way, but suppressing the truth because it's so freaking scary that they can't publish it. Like all the publishers are saying, no, your data must be wrong. You can't say that. That's going to freak people out. So they're actually holding back how dire the situation is. Like, yeah, we gotta do something. Like our ass is in the sling. So this 30 to 35 year period, like there's some stuff that needs to go on. We have a massive upward trend in entrepreneurship. I mean, jobs as we know them are not a thing that are going to continue to exist in the way that they have, which is both scary for people who have been job dependent and super exciting to be a foundational baseline of the culture for people who that hasn't been a reality for a long time. What I'm most excited about in all that is that when someone becomes an entrepreneur, they have to ask a number of questions, namely, what am I good at? Which leads you to the question of, what's unique and specifically interesting about me? What might be a soul gift? What's something that I can actually cultivate and give in the marketplace that people will find valuable? So people will stop doing stupid, meaningless, useless tasks simply for the survival of their financial well-being, and they have to start to ask the question, like, what's my usefulness? Like, what do I actually want to do and give that's a value of my specific humanity? That's exciting. We haven't found that as the center of a whole cultural shift ever. So that's super cool. We are operating presently not in that. We are operating presently in a culture of business that erodes the good, that actually hurts and externalizes harm to the rest of the population and the rest of reality. That's not okay. That shit's got to stop. And so if we start to look at all these things together, basically what it says is we've outgrown ourselves. Everything about being human that has existed up until now is going to be insufficient for who we have to be next. And that doesn't mean that we throw away everything that we've been. We need to take all the goodness that has happened so far and say, we got to go beyond that. We got to do something more. We got to do something bigger. Because literally the survival of the species depends on it. And the metaphor, I know I've used this a lot, it's been said in a lot of places, we're in the birth canal. The walls are closing in and we can't see what's on the other side, but that's literally what is happening in humanity. And people are feeling it on an individual level, and it's happening on a collective level. It's certainly happening on a planetary level. Does that resonate?
Yes.
Yeah. Who else has got a little bit of like, oh shit, happening in their body? Yeah. Yeah, that's been the state of my belly for about 3 months. Okay, so most of you who have played with me in other events have seen this map. I want to talk a little bit about what I think is one of the most important cornerstones of everything that's shifting and shaping, and that is a rise of an integral level consciousness. History has really been the story of unfolding consciousness in multiple levels over time. And we are living in a moment where all of these levels of consciousness are operating at the same time. And that's one of the reasons it's so radically confusing for so many people, is that literally we're talking to different humans. Everyone thinks that we are one human species and population, and on many senses we are, but on a consciousness development level, we are not. We literally have different phases of development and evolution happening in different people. So you have someone who's radical right-wing, pro-lifer in Alabama who's having a conversation with a radically liberal, tech expert in Silicon Valley. Those levels of consciousness are not in any way, shape, or form the same. And historically, we've seen that march of evolutionary consciousness happening, and it's kind of been the story that is culminating to this point. And up until now, we've had seven different levels of consciousness. Is that right, Jim? Is that my numbers, Jim? Yeah. Let me just do the math. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. Yeah, 6 up until now. Correct my math. And we are finally at the point where inherently in this next emerging level of consciousness, which integral theory talks about, Jean Piaget talks about, spiral dynamics talks about, Maslow talked about, all these different philosophers and psychologists talked about, we are literally finally at the point where the level of consciousness that will be emerging is going to be able to look back and say, I value this, I value this, I value this, I value this. It's all really positive, and it all needs to be working in an inclusive model so it can work together. Up until now, everything that has happened says, I'm becoming this, and I hate everything that was happening previously. Anything that is not who I am, I can't tolerate and I can't handle, which has resulted in massive culture wars. So if you look at any news station on TV, you look at any kind of political, social, cultural, philosophical, art, any sort of conversation that's happening in the mainstream, what you're watching is a clash of consciousness. So we need a consciousness that is unifying, that's actually bringing this all together. And this is not hippie, airy-fairy, I wish it was this way kind of flighty thinking. That's not what's happening. This is actual researched data that we're looking at, and what we know right now is that we are sitting between 5 and 6% of a cultural shift. At 10%, we see a tipping point, and that culture gets adopted all the way through the rest of the collective. It doesn't mean that everyone moves up to that point. It means that those values, those ways of seeing things are actually are able to be adopted and looked at and seen and valued. So the level of inclusion that we're going to start moving into is amazing. And because that's happening and unifying everything, it's rippling down chaos into the present moment. So part of the chaos is happening because we are all coming together and we're getting closer and closer and closer. More conversations are happening. And the people are saying, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, are freaking the fuck out. It's just so much input, it's so much data, it's so much for them to handle that, again, we have a system with so much complexity with an infrastructure that is unable to handle that. Is that making sense? Is that resonating? Okay. Entrepreneurship is on the rise. one of the statistics I saw is that by year 2020, there will be up to 1 billion entrepreneurs on the planet. Holy crap. That's a lot. And the way that this is looked at this number is really interesting. China and India are the first and second billion. That's where a number of the entrepreneurs are going to come online. And the third billion are women. Women in not just emerging cultures, but in first and second world cultures that have been not ready to step into entrepreneurship, but have been held back so much that it's time to say, like, that's not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to be held down. This is insufficient for who I am, and it's time to get out and actually express in the marketplace. It's really freaking exciting. There's no mystery that as we're shifting into this new collective culture, the former structuralized patriarchy that has been a part of how things have been is not going to make it through in the way that's been operating. You know, the rise of feminine type values of inclusion and wholeness are really going to be a big part of the hallmark of what has to happen next. So this idea of entrepreneurs being more and more and more active, to me, means that it's a population that's super ripe for saying, hey, what if we did it this way? What if we did it this way and we really foundationally and structurally made your business a oscillator of the good into the commons? What if we turned your business into something that actually made everything else better? And it wasn't just, I need to get paid because I need to feed my kids, but your business was a battery turning everything else that it touched into better and better and better things. That's exciting. That's really cool. And that can happen. And what if there were people like us who had been having this conversation for a number of years already that said, hey, there's ways to do this that are, you know, easy and fun and good. And it's not just about your business, it's about you too. You can grow and change and evolve, and we can really all do something together. Whew. Let's do that. So another place that we find ourselves in is we are in currently a failure of business to be liable to the common good. So we have massive amounts of businesses that are skirting public responsibility, and not just in the law. There's lots of that's happening, and I'll give a couple examples. But we're seeing ourselves in win-lose dynamics or win-win-lose, which are actually the scarier ones to me. So win-lose dynamic is like, this business is going to beat out this other business and take their customers, take their whatever. And that's, you know, one thing. It's the win-win-lose dynamics that really are problematic, where one business works together with another business and they do really well together, but everything that they create makes things worse for the people around them. Makes things worse in the environment, makes things worse socially, makes things worse for the families that are working for those companies. That's really a problem, because that's a poison. But those two companies, if they're operating within the law, are incentivized to continue to grow and operate in those ways without any kind of any way to make anything different happen. So the one that I'm thinking of, well, I'll show a slide from in just a minute, is Monsanto. So Monsanto, using Roundup, is in collusion with corporate farming. So you have a company that just wants to sell poison, you have corporate farms that just want to increase their yield, and then downstream from every single one of those farms, people are getting sick. Win for Monsanto, win for the corporate farms, everyone else loses. That's just not okay. That's got to end. And we need a collective of people to rise up and say we're not okay with that, and it's starting to happen. And that's really good. But environmentally, socially, and just from, you know, all vectors, that's got to go away. So a couple examples. CEO indicted on fraud. Harvey Weinstein, world-class, not nice human. Bernie Madoff, $50 billion in fraud. Win-win-lose. Ex-CEO ignored red flags as opioid crisis raged. The amount of damage that people that's happening for people on painkillers right now who are caught up in this cycle of not being able to get off opioids. I'm sure there's stats. There's no way for us to know how far-reaching it is. It's really scary and dangerous. Jury returns $2 billion verdict against Monsanto for couple with cancer. Whew, biggest so far, and there's more coming. Bayer bought them last year, I think. That's going to be a really bad buy. Yep. So this has got to go away. We can't make it through the end of this 30-year window with this kind of stuff happening. It's just not going to work. So there needs to be infrastructural changes, but really what needs to be happening is a groundswell of people who are not caught in corporate structures and not caught in old ways of doing business, who want things to be good, to rise up and create solutions that just make these obsolete, right? This is just an obsolete way of being that hasn't been replaced yet. It's time for something else. You guys familiar with Jamie Wheal?
Oh, the book, yeah.
Yeah. This book was massive last year for a lot of people, Stealing Fire. I was listening to Jamie on Rebel Wisdom, and he said a couple of really interesting things. And I'm going to do that awful thing of just reading from the slide that you're not supposed to do, so forgive me for one slide, please. This consciousness shift is not to become self-obsessive, recursive, endless personal journey game. Maybe the hippies got to try that. We don't. We're all needed, and we're all needed at full strength. Woo! We don't get to go on the endless personal discovery, endless personal journey anymore. This isn't just about figuring out yourself. For people who are on that journey, no matter where you are on it, it's time to do something good with it. That's cool. There was a period for endless self-discovery. That period is past. We can have Tuesdays and Thursdays, endless self-discovery. The rest of the week, let's get some shit done. It's here, just in time. We might not get the chance to gawk and dawdle in the magic and wonder of our own transformations. Instead, it might be like, here's the tools, folks. Rip the Band-Aid off, wake the fuck up, and get your wobbly legs about you. Because you are needed. Yeah, let's do that. The father of artificial intelligence says the singularity is 30 years away. Whew. Ray Kurzweil has been talking about this for quite some time. And I said it before, I'll say it again. We literally cannot see what happens when this hits. We don't have the level of awareness to see what could come of this. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about the other day, just as an example, imagine what it would be like to have real-time biochemical neurological feedback feeding into an AI computer that was feeding you a real-time live movie that it was creating on the fly, specifically based on what you were experiencing. That could happen. And people would start watching a movie and never leave. These are the kinds of things that we can't see now, and the implications of what becomes of it, we don't know. But I want to start to dovetail two conversations here, and that's the artificial intelligence conversation and the consciousness conversation. If we can build in consciousness that says, I want to be radically inclusive, I want to be operating for the good, the true, and the beautiful, all life is valuable, I want to be in the expression of helping people deliver and experience their own soul gifts. What if that was built into that power? Now we've got a real conversation on our hands. If we don't have that, we've got a real problem on our hands, because most of the discussion going into AI is society will be at its apex when it's the most logical. That is really scary and dangerous, because that is such a small slice of who we are as humans. That excludes emotionality. That excludes spirituality. So if we are just operating from a purely linear and logical AI, the most logical choice is going to be to eliminate the species, because we're chaos. Because it's not looking at the beautiful and amazing things that could happen. So there needs to be a real meshing of an integral level consciousness into technology so that we can ensure that it's actually working with and for us. Jeffrey.
Yeah, just piggyback on what you just said, like, if artificial intelligence is being designed, and I've read this recently around the biases that come from the people that are designing the code that creates their, whether it's male, female,
Yeah.
black, white, are they going to embed into the code deliberately or unconsciously the biases and the perspectives that they value most?
Totally. Exactly. And it's the funny thing is we don't start to see that we're doing that until we have integral level perspectives. We don't see that most of the frames that we're operating from are based on our own level of development. Most programmers, most coders are operating from a linear logical level of development, and they're wishing more of the world would be like them. So that's what's getting imbued into what's happening. And I want logic to be a part of what happens, but I don't want it to be all of what happens. Yeah.
Hey Matt.
Yeah.
This is one of the conversations that's really hot for me right now.
Yeah.
In my work also. And I am working with a lot of different AI companies in different parts of the world. And the leaders that I'm working with are saying that it's actually 10 years away, not 30.
Wow.
So all the people in the field that I know are all saying it's 10 years out, not 30.
Wow.
So I think I just wanted to crank up the heat a little bit.
Yeah.
Because this is real.
Yeah.
This is real.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
This is real.
In case you didn't see that or hear that, insider information. We may be 10 years out from AI singularity. Whew. Yeah, thanks for turning up the heat. I am sweating a little bit more now.
So I actually work with that kind of person,
Yeah.
people as well, a lot, have the last couple of years, and they actually do think that it's coming way, way sooner, which has completely freaked me out
Yeah.
all along as I'm working on these projects with people, and I get really concerned about with the idea of that, just to pull out a small piece of it, they program smart contracts, which means that that contract is going to deploy no matter what. So where is there room for the what if happens? And that concept has freaked me out.
Yeah. I don't want to rabbit hole this too much, but I kind of do. So.
I have something interesting as well.
Please, yeah.
So one of my colleagues, he's a filmmaker, director. His film, Lawnmower Man. You guys remember that? 26
Yeah.
years old. He's making a remake, by the way.
Yes.
But it's the first film, Brett Leonard. It's the first film that coined the term virtual reality. But he and I go deep down this rabbit hole all the time. And what he shares with me is that from him and a lot of people's perspective is that virtual and AI technology are actual non-physical intelligences that are tapping in through our technology to interface with us because they can't in our physical dimension, which is super fun to
Yep.
work on for a long time.
Yep. Yeah. We're just going to put a post-it note on that one because I want to pick your brain on that.
I love it.
One of the potential solutions I see in this conversation, and one of the technologies I've been watching quite a bit, there's a few different versions, but Elon is working on one called Neuralink. And Neuralink is a way to get the human brain connected to a computer. So this is exciting to me because if we can have hybrids, then we have a physical human body intelligence. We have an emotional intelligence, we have a mental intelligence, and we have a spiritual intelligence that's merging with what will feel like infinite amount of power and capability that's technologically mediated. So we start seeing things like hive mind that become a real possibility. We start to see things like the dropping away of inhibitions of really, I think almost everything that's bad that happens in the culture is because people are afraid of being seen for what's happening inside their bodies. You know, they're ashamed of the experiences they are having that they want to have. If you had a direct neurological to neurological connection with another human being, all that goes away. So there are some ways forward through this that are really exciting. And if everyone was technologically mediated and connected in a hive sort of culture, we become, for the first time, really one organism. And there's a trajectory through that we don't know, but really powerful, and the potential there is huge. Yeah. Cool. Interesting timing, although you guys have just blown the doors on this one for me, because I was working on that 30-year timeline, but who knows? Thanks a lot. Climate change now represents near to midterm existential threat to human civilization. Oh shit. A 2050 scenario is outlined, accelerating climate change impacts posing large negative consequences to humanity, which might not be undone for centuries. Keep breathing, keep breathing. This is the best. It's not a technological or scientific problem. It's a question of humanity's socio-political values. We need a social tipping point that flips our thinking before we reach a tipping point in the climate system. This is a consciousness problem. The government's 90% of people in the government, I would bet, don't have the cognitive complexity to actually understand at this level of what's going on. When we start to look at developmental levels of consciousness, there are correlating cognitive capabilities that happen at each level. And at lower levels, you literally just cannot comprehend, or are unwilling to start to try to comprehend the level of what's happening. This is what we're facing. So this is a consciousness first problem, then a socio-political and technological problem after that. So we have AI and singularity, cyborg tech, biological tech, second-tier consciousness, this new integral emerging consciousness, radical life extension. To start to grok all those things together, a reality we can't understand. At the same time, we have environmental collapse. We have social, familial, structural erosion. We have rampant narcissism in the culture. The baby boomers were called the me generation. The millennials are being called the me generation. And that's not to knock millennials. I mean, that's the nature of the culture. We're seeking so much validation and approval, and we have so much access to externalized eyes. I mean, it's just such a different space than anyone has ever grown up in. So, like, being radically connected to being paid attention to, it's a level of stimulus that none of us had to endure. And we have the culture wars. So when I look at a system, and this system being reality, humanity, that has this much going on, I'm asking questions like, what the fuck is happening here? There's some real shit going on. And if we look at all of these pressures pushing in on each other, really, what lives at the center? There's got to be something else that shows up. And to me, really, that thing is the most potent opportunity and the only way forward. We have massive amount of possibility right now. So much good can come of what happens in the next 30 or 10 years. And we've got work to do. We've got real work to do. And it doesn't have to be hard work. It doesn't have to be roll up our sleeves work, but we've got to be conscious, and we've got to be paying attention, and we've got to be making sure that the things that we're doing are actually making a difference. Someone's sitting on something. Someone's got something to say. I can feel it. Question, thought, quip, anecdote, limerick, riddle.
It's a tough reality to sit here with, especially as, you know, the collective in this room are at a higher level.
Absolutely.
And I spent half my day with the lower level who don't even have access to cell phones. And when you put that perspective also in the field, what happens to them?
Yeah.
So
Let's make sure really good things happen with them. And if we're not having this conversation, we're not going to be motivated to make sure that that's occurring, right? And I have the sleepless nights like we all do, you know, saying like, the cards have been played and it's time to figure out who wins, and it's got to be all of us. There's not really any other solution besides that. Yeah, thank you. Who else? How's it feeling?
All of my business endeavors deal with legacy, as a note. And this is just letting the fire under of what if, how do I, I've got a bunch of how do I questions I've written down, especially on the family side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. Yeah, the idea that family sizes keep getting smaller and smaller, like we went from villages to tribes to individual nuclear families to single parents to, you know, like, yeah, right. And it just keeps getting smaller and smaller, and people getting more and more stressed out. Like, it's not working. We need something else. Bucky Fuller? Whether it's to be utopia or oblivion will be a touch-and-go relay race right up to the final moment. Humanity is in the final exam as to whether or not it qualifies for continuance in the universe.
Boom.
Yikes! So it doesn't have to be that way. And there have been people in the past who have said, this isn't working. There have been shifts in consciousness in the past where small groups of people have gotten together and said, this isn't going to work. We got to do it differently. And things really changed. In Integral, we talk about colors for the levels of consciousness. When we shifted from blue to orange over the course of roughly 100 years, it resulted in the Great Enlightenment, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, many revolutions in South America, amazing shifts in art, in literature, in philosophy, all underpinned on a shift in consciousness. In the 1960s, we had a ton of radical diversification. We had equal rights. We had a big bump in women's rights. We had all kinds of new social structures that started to get put into place because we went from orange to green. And that was in the course of 10 years or so. And we're at that place again where it's time for something new and something different. So what got us here isn't working anymore. As a matter of fact, if we continue to do it, it's not going to take us very far. There's an revolution in consciousness happening. And that's not just metaphoric or nicey spiritual talk. That's actual data and research sociologically proven over the course of decades. There are big things to deal with. There's massive existential risks and massively powerful technology happening at the same time. The mind, the individual human mind, is actually insufficient to handle the amount of complexity that we're seeing, which is a little scary, but it's actually more exciting to me. And we'll talk about why in just a minute. We're 30 to 35 or 10 years from a corner we can't see around. So I said this earlier and I'm going to say it again. It's time for entrepreneur to mean something more. So much of entrepreneurship has been survival based. Has been, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to do the next thing? How am I going to do the next launch? And even when people have the money, they stay in a survival mindset, and they don't, most of them. There's some good examples of this not happening and people really doing good things, but most people just look at how they can continue to prosper themselves, and it's not working. So what if instead we had a collective of entrepreneurs committed to the grand flourishing of all aspects of personal beingness, collective thriving, and an imminent movement towards a viable future for our species? What if we really committed to being different and doing different and taking care of each other and taking care of the planet and taking care of all the people who don't know that they have to get taken care of? What if we committed to the things that we do now being really good for our kids and our grandkids and their grandkids? And there's some people who are doing that. But it's not enough. And it's time. And it's possible. And we can do it. So the suite of solutions that I see really needing to happen, the first is being able to handle massive complexity, being able to understand the level of the game that we're playing, which is the risks and the shift that has to happen, and being radically inclusive, and really valuing wholeness, valuing every human, bringing their whole human to the experience. And that has never happened before either, where everyone just gets to be them. It's time for that. That needs to happen socially, morally, intellectually, emotionally, interpersonally, primarily. Then we'll get into the financial, governmental structures and all that after that. Systemic solutions that are actually complex enough to generate change. So what if, as the Internet of Things comes online, we had small remote sensing devices that were designed to be flying over the polar ice caps and be monitoring for ice changes and relaying feedback real time into an AI that was tracking that change with what was going on in the Indian Ocean, with what was going on in sub-Saharan Africa, and was able to actually strategize and look at all of the data that was going on the planet. What if there was an AI that was capable of doing that, and all those sensors and monitors were biodegradable? So they're solar powered. If they break, they fall into the earth and they just fertilize and become good. That's the level of complexity we need to start thinking at. And again, we're heading in that direction. That's really cool. And then we need a level of governance that can actually handle that. And I think, and I'll say this again, I think entrepreneurs are actually the most uniquely positioned to make a change here, because they recognize what benefiting themselves looks like and feels like. They can actually build things to make their lives better that makes everyone else's lives better. And we can get lots and lots and lots of people, rather than waiting on large organizations or governments to do that, that are way too slow, that are not complex enough, and are just not going to be able to get to the solutions that need to happen. Does that make sense? Does anyone else feel that way about entrepreneurs? Am I alone in this? I can't think of another segment of society that is really incentivized enough, is willing to do the work, and has the access to what needs to happen. I mean, I really think, and maybe this is my own megalomania, maybe this is my own ego trip, but I really think like we're the ones. That's cool.
As a former non-entrepreneur, I had no idea entrepreneurs. There's a whole different ecoscape, everything about it. It just sounds, oh, those are business people.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah. Totally, I totally agree. Yeah, and you all know, and I don't even talk about it here because you all know, inherent in the entrepreneurial journey is a radical self-healing journey, a radical personal identity evolution journey, and a radical spiritual awakening for people who are operating from that level. Like, it's built in. You don't get to hide from that shit. So, like, you get the whole kit and caboodle, and you get to do good stuff in the world. Or you get to become a jerk if you want to do that too, but let's not do that. We got enough of that. I've been asking the question, what would building a structure based on these principles look like? What would behoove us as humans to start to build now that would be a virtual perpetual motion machine that would just be cranking out good, cranking out truth, and cranking out beauty? And I've been asking this question for quite some time as I've been finding myself pondering, all the things that we're up against. And the answer became obvious and embarrassingly simple, and at the same time so fulfilling that I want to share with all you. So I'm going to start to merge into some of that conversation. Here's the guiding principles of what it's all built on. First is the win-win-win. And those of you who have been through some of the integral material understand that means that in any interaction, because we're interacting, excuse me, I win, I get what I want and need, you win, you get what you want and need, and because you and I win, everyone around us wins. Wouldn't that be great? And this phrase that you've heard me mention a couple times tonight, the good, the true, and the beautiful, which are the 3 great treasures of philosophy. If we build companies based on, is it creating good? Is it created from and creating more truth? And is it making my world and the rest of the world really fucking beautiful? That's delightful. We want more of that. So the win-win-win, 2 thoughts here. Omni consideration. How many factors can you take into account as you're building what you're building? Does it make sense ecologically? Does it obviously take care of you financially? Does it help you meet your own kind of personal and developmental needs? Does it help you grow as a human? Does it then ripple out and make more good for everyone who's around you? Does it help the environment? Does it create more cohesion in your community? Like, do all these things get benefited because you built a business? And this can be crazy making, or we can keep it in mind and do our best. And the other is omnipositivity. So do the things that I create more and more and more good? Or is it good, and then not so good? So is my business picking all the trash up out of the ocean, but then we incinerate it, and then we pollute the atmosphere? That would be it's good, not so good. So we need to be looking down the line as far as we can in order to see, like, how far can we actually reach in creating good. Most of us in the room are operating from an entrepreneurial perspective, marketing, online, coaching, helping, healing, kind of in that space, right? One of the things that I would love to see formalized into the industry that we're operating from is a code of ethics. Can we really let people know what we're about and what we're doing? Can we get clear for ourselves on what we stand for and how we want to interact with the people that are working with us? There has been way too much, use a technical term, fuckery in our space, with people making quick sales on stuff that isn't really good and creating a philosophy around it that really just serves their win, but not the win for the people they're helping or in a grander sense. So how do we create an ethics that works for us, that really we want to be operating a business from? I think it's important. I think it's time. So the ethics that I've decided to work from at this point, this iteration, we maximize the experience and expression of an individual and collective sovereignty. So that means that when I am working with a person, when I am doing healing work, transformational work, coaching, when I am selling to someone, when I am taking payment for something that they bought, everything that I'm doing is seeking to make them more free, to make them more independent, to make them more powerful. Versus what happens for most of us, and we'll talk about this a little later, when we go to an event, is we get manipulated for 2 days and then we get sold to. That's not okay. That can't happen anymore. We can have really good quality tactics for how to maximize the revenue we make, and it needs to be done in a completely different way. If it's not moving towards sovereignty, then it's ultimately self-terminating. Because the drive to sovereignty is so big in the collective right now that if we have missed this, the business shelf life is not as long. And I'm seeing this more and more with people who are grabbing for their sales. Their businesses are having a hard time. We maximize the good, the true, and the beautiful. We enhance inclusive wholeness. So how is my business designed to make people feel like they're a part of something, that they're wanted, that they're welcome, no matter who they are no matter how they show up in life, no matter how they choose to be, whether that's racially, sexually, financially, socioeconomically, any of their kind of parts are all welcome and brought into the fold and celebrated. That can be designed into a business. We operate from our inherent gifts. One of the things that I see killing so many entrepreneurs is that they have to play the solopreneur game. And they're doing a lot of stuff that they're really bad at. And that's not okay. We need groups of people working together to help each other that are actually suited to do that. This lone wolf thing is an important part of the journey. It can't be as much of the journey as it's been. Is that ringing for anyone? Yeah. We balance both growth and safety. So in a coaching session, I'm going to push someone until I don't push them anymore, because you push them too far and there's lack of safety. In a sales interaction, I'm going to push until it's not safe to push anymore. I'm going to push for the good of their growth, and then that's it. There's so much emphasis on grow, 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 and it makes people feel like when they're not doing it right. It's actually trauma-inducing. I can't tell you the number of entrepreneurial situations I've seen that are creating micro-traumas for people because they're insensitive to the fact that safety needs to be foundational for anything else to happen. We're committed to the ever-expanding ripple of the win-win-win. We are committed to the expression of both intelligence and love in all we create. I was having this conversation recently with Christina. She was in the office, and we were talking about, it was one of those kind of rocking days in the office, and everyone was, having an experience. And we're just kind of talking about how that happens, and I heard myself saying, and then realized retrospectively that this has been the way that I've operated for years. If there's any sort of magic to what I'm doing, it's because I fall in love with everyone that I'm working with. I mean, literally, not romantically, obviously, but literally the amount of love that I feel for all of you in this moment, of course, and when I'm working with you, it's the only way that real shift can happen. And if we're cutting off that part of us, it can probably work, but why? Why? So, as an example, everything that I'm building here forward, this is the ethics that I'm operating from, and I'm still on my baby legs, making sure that it's getting expressed in all the way that it needs to, and getting it built in and systematized and structured. But my invitation is the amount of self-reflection that happens in defining your ethics. If you haven't done that yet, there's a lot of good that can come of it. This word mastermind is fascinating. And I don't think mastermind is really going to do it for us anymore. I don't think the mind is really the limit of where we need to be going. Sitting in a room with a bunch of people thinking is getting really old. And one of the things that I've been thinking about, and depending on who ends up watching this will be a popular or unpopular belief. I think there's been a lot of things that the churches got right that we're missing. There's a lot of things the churches didn't get right. I'll go on record saying that too. But the amount of community, subtle state, love-based experiences that happened as part of those structures is really inspiring. And I just keep having this feeling of what would it look like if we were able to create those types of experiences for entrepreneurs so they could prosper themselves, prosper their clients, and prosper the whole world. I'm not talking about starting a church, that's not what this is. But I think that there's some structures that have existed in that and lots of other things that were really great. So, I don't know, maybe call it an epic mind or a master soul, or I call it whatever you want, but I think that there's cool things that can come from getting a group of entrepreneurs together and going beyond the thinking. So one of the cool things that I've seen happen in the office is what starts to occur when you have 4 people operating on the same wavelength. What happens when you have multiple operating as one? the synergy, the literal group dynamics and energetic synergy that happens in that space is going to feed most of the next steps that people need. That's cool. That needs to get created. Out of the dozens and maybe more of business events that I've gone to that have taught me things that I'm very grateful for, the thing that I recognize most is that true change happens when a human is energized and when they are resourceful, not just in their mind, but when they are actually participating in a level of energy that is beyond what they've had access to on their own. That's where most shifts happen. That's why I have done retreats, because you get the opportunity to immerse someone in something for a period of time that takes them beyond their normal level of experiencing. So it's not, most people think they go to business events to grow their business by learning something new and applying it to the business. It's always, I'm going to make a dangerous statement here. I'm very careful with always. I'm going to say it, we'll see what happens. Future will prove it right or wrong. It's always the entrepreneur that grows first and the business that follows. And if we're not putting ourselves in situations where we are energized, where we are becoming more coherent, where we're finding the dark and cobwebby corners and really working together and giving and receiving, the amount of people I see cut off from just openly giving because they are at a loss, like they're operating, they're running on fumes. Like, entrepreneurs are built to give, so let's give them a structure where we can give to each other and everyone grows their business. That's cool. How's this feeling?
Amazing.
Cool. Thoughts? Questions? Nope? Good. Remember this guy? Quite clearly, our task is predominantly metaphysical, for it is how to get all of humanity to educate itself swiftly enough to generate spontaneous social behaviors that will avoid extinction. Bucky had it right. Yep. So all of this speaks to what comes beyond the mind. And part of what's coming next, and there isn't really a lot of people talking about this in a grounded way. There's a lot of people talking about it in a very kind of ungrounded way, without using disparaging terms, is really the emergence of soul as an accessible energy and a way of operating. We have been living in a mind-dominated culture, and it's created lots of awesome stuff. All the technology, all of this that we're doing now has existed because we've really mastered mindfulness. But there's not a whole lot more depth we can go. We can get a lot more breadth. There's lots more things we can do, but we're not going to evolve as humans until a soul-level centricity is able to come on board. And a technologically mediated space where all humans are operating together, connecting with each other's individual human experiences. Interesting. We're actually creating a structured technological way to access soul. This whole AI singularity thing, it's happening right on time. So this level of intelligence of soul is really going to be part of what happens, the consciousness shift, the technology shift, and everything that needs to happen from it. So entrepreneurship has been, from the integral level of development, it has been orange, which is massively personally focused, very strive focused, very Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary, if you end up seeing this, we love you. Very grinding it out, making it happen, like really getting in there and just doing the work. That's what it's been. It's been very left brain, linear, logical, rational, reductionistic, cutting out parts of the self to just succeed, purely mental, and it's been isolationist and striving based. Radically isolationist. With the rise of co-working and that kind of stuff, there's more kind of connection now, but most people are just hammering it out in their bedroom, just trying to make it work. What entrepreneurship must be is integral and visionary, and I, we, and it inclusive, meaning that a business serves us, it serves all of us, and it serves everything out there as well. whole human focused. So not just part of us. You get to bring all of you to your business. You don't have to hide anything at home. It's a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And it operates both on the general and the specific. I'll explain that more in just a minute. So we started throwing around this word mastermind. I'm using the royal we. I started throwing around this word mastermind. What masterminds have been is one influencer, one leader, one mastermind person at the top, right? The genius, guru, business guy or girl who got it all figured out, and someone else paying them a whole bunch of money to solve their problems. Okay. What if it looked like this? Which structure is stronger? Which structure receives more information? Which structure receives more attention? Which structure receives more energy? Which is more complex? This is cool. So with the first one, single point of failure. If this person at the top doesn't have your answer, have fun sitting through the next 3 days. However, if we were able to extract the intelligence of everyone who was participating in a group and give that intelligence to the right person in the right moment to help them make the growth and shift that they need to grow, we've got a whole different conversation happening, a whole different thing that's possible. That's cool, right? What if we had both systems of what has worked across multiple industries for multiple people, and we had a way of looking at what traditionally, this is what traditionally masterminds do. Say, you need to be doing it this way, this is how it has worked. But then you paired that with solutions that are specific to you. This is one of the things that has bothered me, I'll put the term lightly, about working with mentors, is that I'm an odd duck. I've done a lot of work, just like everyone else in the room. You work with a lot of people who figured it out on a big scale, which really means that they figured it out for the center of the bell curve. They figured it out for the people who are like most people. They probably haven't figured it out for people who are on either end of the bell curve. That's problematic. We need solutions that understand who a human is in all of their attributes and characteristics, and that can help give the solutions that are necessary for that type of person. Does that make sense?
It's learning theory.
Yeah. So how does all of your personality types, Myers-Briggs, your Enneagram, your DISC, your human design, your wealth dynamics, best operate in a business? Imagine if you went to a mastermind meeting and you looked at someone's name tag that had a list of all their attributes and characteristics across many different personality profiles. And you're like, oh my God, you're a lord in wealth dynamics. I've been looking for someone who has your exact perspective. That would be huge. Imagine if you were in a small group paired with people who were specifically designed to help you, not just a random grouping of people who you like. We want to like those people too, but that's not enough. We need more complex solutions. What if it also addressed your level of personal consciousness development? What if you had someone who could see you for the level of development that you've done? That's huge. That's not getting offered by 99% of what's out there. What if you had ways to build in structures specifically to speak to the level of consciousness that your audience is operating from? Because an orange audience wants different things than a green audience that wants different things than the light yellow audience. And you need to understand that, and that needs to be part of what's getting built. And what if it was all designed around helping you extract your soul gifts? Yes, please. So events, let's make it as cold as we can in the room so we can jam all the shit in your brain and you don't fall asleep and you don't move for 3 days, you just sit in your chair and you get pitched on the second day. And then you go home both excited and exhausted. Monday morning, so much to do, so much to catch up on. 2 weeks later, excitement's gone, nothing has changed. And the rhetoric is, you didn't work hard enough or you should have bought my thing. That's why two weeks later, nothing's changed. You did it wrong. You came to my thing and you did it wrong. That doesn't feel good. I don't like that. What if instead, We have a star. What if instead the focus was evolving the entrepreneur so the business could evolve? Part of what I'm going to be doing for this next offering is a 3-day structure that I don't think exists anywhere in the market. This 3-day structure is built specifically on the good, the true, and the beautiful. Day 1 is the truth. So we learn could be didactically, could be group, could be a number of different ways, the things that you need to be stepping into next in your own personal and spiritual evolution. And then we can also bring in our guest speakers, who are awesome, amazing, talented humans in the industry to help us learn the things in our business that we need to learn. We can also, because there's a massive wealth of intelligence from inside the room, bring people up to speak on stage who have already mastered the things that we need to learn. And we can find structures for creating more of those interconnections within the room so that you have access to what they already know. There's an amazing, when I even just think of this room, there's an amazing amount of wisdom here. And if we just spent 3 days, and again, this isn't a pitch, but just kind of spitballing, if we spent 3 days like helping each other in our business, the shit that could happen would be massive. I have no doubt in my mind. Day 2 is the good. One of my biggest complaints with going to a 3-day mastermind event is Monday morning hits, and now I have all this stuff I didn't do on the weekend and the new stuff to apply, and I'm behind the 8 ball. So what if we spent a day actually working together to get some stuff done? And you had access to other people who could help you with the stuff that you don't know how to do. Is anyone familiar with Scrum?
Yeah.
So Scrum is a technique that often gets used in building software, where they put everything that has to happen to build the software up on the board. And everyone just looks at the board and said, okay, I can do this next. Okay, I can do this next. Okay, I can do this next. And there's no hierarchy, there's no structure. It's just everyone working on stuff. And everyone helps each other get their stuff done. Instead of having some sort of, weird, they actually found that having hierarchical ways of doing things in those environments makes things worse. So what if we had a day where we had 2 groups, and we had an A group and a B group, and during A group's time, everyone who is in B group helped them work on the stuff that they don't know how to do in their business, design a logo, write some copy, get that website up, so they could actually go home at the end of that night and their business was in a new place that it wasn't before, that either they had too much resistance or they didn't know how to do the thing. And then after lunch, B group helped A group, and everyone left with shit getting done.
Wow.
That's cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, that's a true interconnected web. And then day 3 was the beautiful. And we did celebration. Because neurologically, celebrating helps you reinforce everything that you've just done and anchor that in as your new way of being. Part of what happens when people go to events is they have an identity shift, and they go home and they don't have the structures to maintain that identity. They go back into the structures that were, and they go back to being who they were. So what if we celebrate and start to anchor that in, anchor in that identity that actually helped us say, no, this is who I am now. And then we did healing and self-care. What if at a mastermind you got a sound bath for an hour and a half? To land in and anchor in all of this stuff that you just did and just learned. What if you got on and got some network after doing all of this? And you didn't have to schedule in that massage the next day because your human got better and more healthy and more complete and more whole. This is where this has to go. Actually go home rejuvenated, more capable to handle life and business. That's what a mastermind should do. Should. Unleashing the we. I'm going to try not to get too technical. The soul, massive, direct experience into the body through subtle state energetics. When your body, your beingness is energized and fully awake and aware, simply stated, the soul has more place to land. So if we're doing group energetic practices, if we're doing true cohering methods and letting us operate from as an individual structure, as a one structure, rather than just a bunch of minds floating around a room, there's a total different level of what's possible. This is the same principle that the F1 pit crews operate on. How do we operate as one organism? You know, the team that's got that, that's in the Super Bowl, that's got the juice, they've got the flow, they've got the goods, that's what's happening. It's all subtle state. I've spent a decade, 2 decades, exploring my own subtle states and then learning how to do that for others and for groups. Like, this is something that is totally possible, that's doable. Intentionally creating upward spirals of emotion, thought, and energetic access. There's a whole bunch of research. I have the citations for here, down here, for what upward spirals are. But you know, you get in the room and the room just starts doing this and this and this and this. Everyone gets more and more excited. You get better ideas. Synchronicity hits, serendipity hits. We can build that. That can happen. We know how to do that when it's used responsibly. This is used nefariously right before a pitch. In many rooms I've been in, that shit's not okay. Network effects. If you have a highly energized network, there is, again, I've got a whole bunch of research on this, of the level of intelligence you can extract from that group is not the same as linear, rational, didactic conversation. And then emotional contagions. We definitely, you can see this operating in groups. They've studied this a lot online, but how do you create specific environments that help people have exactly the emotional experience that they need to have to push through what needs to happen next? What if, instead of, this is what's worked for me, this is what I think will work, this is what I value and what I want to work, I only share my successful client stories. Yikes. We set a new standard for the whole industry, and we actually discerned the value that was getting created for everyone. So we looked at the results across the board, and we got the data, and we actually said across all of our numbers, there was an overall 22% increase in income in a 12-month period. And we could plot that under a bell curve. So when someone was interested in joining a group like this, we could hand them this documentation and say, most people experience this, some people experience this. This is what you can expect. We have actual data to say that's true. Not, Jenny from South Carolina did my program 2 months ago, and look what Jenny did. Like, we want testimonials too, that's really good, but what if we could actually say, no, we've studied this, this is what's going on. That's cool. And what if it was both quantitative and qualitative? Not just here's the raw numbers, but like also here's some really good shit that happened. When Jenny applied the things that she learned, this person got out of an abusive relationship. This person doubled their income and was able to contribute back to starving children and all the places children starve. You know, what if we really started to track the qualitative good that our businesses were producing? The reason people don't do this is they're afraid to say, I have clients that aren't getting results. And they're hiding that in the shadows of their business. It's becoming part of their business shadow. And you know, all from doing personal work, when you hide stuff in the shadow, it just comes back to poison you later. If we get this out in the open, one of the things that's going to happen is people who are part of this organization are going to say, holy shit, we got 22% success over last year. What would it take to get it to 32? And it's actually going to motivate them to do things better. That's really fucking cool. I'm excited. Is this just exciting to me? Okay. What if we had a pricing model that took into account the fact that for hundreds of years, not everyone was treated equally? I wish it were the case. And yes, everyone is empowered. Everyone has the capability to make money, and everyone is, can pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. My conversation in this is, if we want to run a business for 100 years or 200 years, we need to look 100 or 200 years in the past, see what we're building on. And what we're building on hasn't been all that great in a number of scenarios. So for people who have been underprivileged, people who have been marginalized, people who have not gotten a fair shake, we should take that into consideration and help them get a leg up, help them have the type of support they actually need. Not because they need to stretch and pay the dollars to do that, like, fuck that. No, we need a different solution to help people who haven't got the same chances that we've gotten. What if the mastermind you were part of showed where all the money went? Not, I paid you 30 grand last year and you're driving a Ferrari, which is great. I want you to drive a Ferrari, that's not bad. But I also want to know that the money I'm investing into you is going to do good things. So what if you decided that everything that came into the business got shared with people who were a part of the mastermind, just so everyone was really clear on what was going on? That to me seems radically different. So where's all that money going? What if we destigmatize both success and failure? How many entrepreneurs are being held back because they're afraid of being a failure, when really it's just numbers on a page? What if we destigmatize that and help them get that out of their own shadow? What if we destigmatize success for people who have made $4 million, but they say, is it okay that I have all this money? I don't know. And they keep themselves shut down. Exact same thing on the opposite side. What if we choose to succeed and fail publicly? And we got support with both? What if we really went after it and it didn't work? And we had a group of people there cheering us on the whole time. And we knew that both were just as good and we're going to keep moving forward no matter what happens. That's cool. What if we were accountable to how the money is invested? This also invites accountability. So a business that operates from this is going to think twice about how it's spending its dollars versus one that has no public accountability. And like corporations have to declare their books to the stockholders and all that, right? But that whole level of consciousness is built on what can I hide? That's not what this is. This is, I'm really proud of how I've invested this money that we've all brought together. Let me show you how we've done this. Let me show you all the good and the truth and the beauty that has come from this. And we all get to succeed together. Hey guys, we pooled all this money together. Look what we did. That's hot. And you get to vote with your dollar. There's a whole movement, most of you probably know about for-benefit corporations. It's something I'm exploring right now. What we've seen is that in almost any marketplace, when a company moves to a for-benefit structure, they start to outperform every other company in the space. It's really cool. And people they don't have time to go and do all the volunteering or extra money to be giving as much as they want. So when they pay for something, they want to know that that money is actually doing good as well as supporting the people that they're paying. One of the ways that I've decided to do this is what I call a seed tree forest prospering model. So we saw this in the mastermind. In this model, all the money goes to the top. It's unidirectional, one point of failure. What if instead we had something much more radically complex? What if instead we had each person who was a part of the mastermind was receiving money from people they invited into a mastermind? And the easy way to look at this would say, oh, Matt's starting an MLM. That's not exactly what's happening. There's a lot of dangers in MLMs because when you get pitched into an MLM, it feels gross. Why does it feel gross? Because you have someone who's really needy, you have someone who is not skillful at sales, and you have someone who hasn't been really, most of the time, steeped in a win-win-win conversation. So what if someone was paying $1,000 for a mastermind, and each person they invited in, they got $100 from them. So 10 people show up that you've invited in, and you're attending the mastermind and getting all the benefits for free. 20 people show up, you're actually getting paid for being in the mastermind. 30 people show up, you're getting paid even more for being in the mastermind. That's interesting. So it's not just all the money moving in one direction. It's really the money getting shared and circulated throughout. That's cool, that's different, that hasn't existed before. One of the things that needs to happen in a model like this to maintain integrity is this is a group of people that needs to be vetted. So not anyone can just join. If you join doTERRA, you don't have to be vetted. You can just start buying oils and selling oils and doing the thing. That's great. That's how doTERRA should work, and they're kicking butt. They're making lots of money. That's good. But for something as inclusive as this, where you're going to have a lot of one-to-one connection, we want to make sure that the people we're bringing in are fucking awesome, and they want the win-win-win, and they want the good, the true, and the beautiful. It also would be criteria for this that making money, if people wanted to use this as an income stream, that this wouldn't be their fundamental business. They need to have a business that's operating at least $5,000 a month before they could even be considered for this. So it's not just coming into this and just to make money, because that shit won't work. But I'm much more excited about a business that grows this way by prospering everyone who's a part of it, rather than a business that just keeps sending money up. Does that make sense? What if you had a mastermind that had a sizable charitable giving, that wanted to take care of people who were being trafficked, that wanted to clean up the oceans, that wanted to be researching benevolent applications for technology, that wanted to be doing all these things that we don't have access to doing in our own day-to-day? What if we were participating in something that could actually do that for the collective, for all of us? Where you didn't have to worry about who you were donating to, because naturally just being a part of this group helped you take care of that. That's super cool. To me, maybe. But I love it. So all of these things can be built into your business. This, like I said, is the example of what I'm creating that I think is pretty fun and cool and exciting. And we'll end with a big, old, very true, slightly cliche, very true quote from Victor Hugo. And that's, there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. It's just the truth of it. It's time. So, I want to see if there's any questions. And also just want to thank you for listening through what maybe has just been exciting to me. We'll find out in a minute. Yeah, and thank you for being a group that can actually hear this. If I tried to give this talk lots of places, business places, it'd be tough. So I'm so grateful that I have people in my life that can actually hear the things that I'm saying, and the things that I get excited about, maybe a couple people get excited about too. So the Synergist Syndicate is officially what this is going to be labeled. And if it's exciting at all, we can talk about it at some point. And I love you. And I'm open to questions if anyone wants to ask questions about how this might apply to their business, these principles, if something I said didn't make any fucking sense, whatever it is you have that's coming up, or just comment, anecdote, whatever you got.
I have a bunch of questions. I'll just start with one.
Great.
It was really interesting. We talked about, when I mentioned learning theory, that the content was designed and aimed at people towards where they are in the spiral. Super brand. I mean, we from a learning standpoint, we've done audio kinesthetic.
Right.
And from a relational standpoint, we've done all the predispositions and attitude, different kinds of testing, those kind of things, but never a consciousness piece. So super freaking curious about if you've thought what that looks like, just in terms of, I guess the measurement isn't that difficult, it probably exists, but how do you modify then, and how does that work within something a big organization?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think really identifying where you are in your own developmental levels of consciousness, identifying who you want to be speaking to, and identifying what the values and the goals and the aims of everything that they're doing. That's really the key. And we have the data of like what percentage of the population lives in each of these levels of consciousness. That's pretty easy. But identifying really who it is that you're speaking to and then talking in their language. It's really that simple. The issue for most of the people that are in our seat is that all of the training that exists out there from successful entrepreneurs is really aimed to do business with people at Orange. And people in this room are not in Orange. You know, definitely green and beyond, mostly yellow, turquoise. So like all the things that we've been taught outside of a few people are aimed to create a business that we can't even actually operate because it's going to be so radically dissatisfying. So identifying who we want to talk to, what they need to hear, and how to say it from their level of consciousness is really, that's the whole deal.
Cool. And I think I'm coming from my own naivete, understanding of, I have exposure to spiral dynamics. I don't have the mastery. So like even in a syndicate like this where there could be 20,000 of people, is there a baseline? So like you said, like above Orange is like, is that part of the vetting process? You got to be above Orange, you know, and then how do you direct interactions accordingly in your,
This is such a cool question. Yeah, really cool question. So Ken Wilber talks about developmental levels of consciousness as a conveyor belt. And from an entrepreneurial perspective, this is what I think I'm building, is you create a way to incentivize and support people moving from where they are to where they have to go and giving them all the tools to do that. So all the principles of what's being built are operating from integral. So teal from integral, yellow from spiral, level awarenesses. All the things that will happen within it are operating from those values, from those ethics, from that level of awareness because it's palatable all the way down the spiral. And what's going to start to happen inevitably is as people are surrounded by that, they're going to notice where it's not happening in their business. They're going to say, oh yeah, it might actually feel better to do it this way. Oh, what if it looked like this? Oh, this person, I saw them do this and it did. So it just pulls people along. Yeah, so it probably won't speak to someone who's in early orange. It probably won't speak to someone who's in early green, but people who are making the orange to green transition, it's going to be huge for. People who are making the transition out of green and into yellow, it's going to be huge for. So those transition pieces are going to be kind of built into that. Yeah. Anyone else? Thoughts, questions?
I could offer some local investment statistics, which is actually supporting exactly what you've described today.
Yes, please.
So I always like to share this because it brings a lot of the conceptual and actually grounds it into actually what's happening here in the third dimension. So right now, so we all know that we talk about, you know, there's a shift in consciousness and we're in the age of information and awareness and consciousness is rising. Well, what's really interesting is that physical data statistics are actually supporting that. So on the consumer end, and then I'm going to talk about the VC investment side. So on the consumer side, 76% of consumers say that they will not purchase from a company that is misaligned with their values. Well, what's even more importantly than that is 55% of consumers say that they're actually willing to pay more for a product if it is aligned with their values. And that number used to be around 18 to 20%, and that was on a good day. Now, if you look at global finance and VC investment, my statistics are only between seed and Series A, so very specific bridge there. Right now, there's currently about a $2.3 trillion funding gap in the impact space. Because the VC market, if you look at typical VC investment, again, between seed and Series A, it's outpacing impact investments, and how we measure impact at this moment is by comparing them to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So it's kind of how you measure, the different series of impact. But anyway, where the $2.3 trillion funding gap is regular C to Series A VC is all the way up here and impact's about right here. Well, what's crazy is that charts are showing by the end of 2020, impact investments are going to exceed by about 60 billion typical VC investments between seed and Series A. So what does that tell us? Is that impact actually becomes a profit strategy for investors long term. Even more importantly, strategically, investing in the impact space actually becomes a de-risking strategy because companies who are not aligned with wellness, I guess if you will, we call it good, beautiful, and companies who do formulate, who now in 2019 want to shift to the impact focus, they actually have a 5 to 15 year advantage to every other company. So that's why it becomes a de-risking strategy, because in the long term, the companies who are not aligned there are going to have to pay more, right? So going back to what you said about the legacy play, a lot of these private family firms, VCs, hedge funds, etc., they're actually looking at as impact for their legacy. Because it is also social clout, right, for a lot of these private family firms, but also statistically showing, that's why I started with the consumers, is that consumers are now paying with their attention, and more importantly, making decisions and paying with their dollars. So for those of us who know that there's currently a $2.3 trillion gap, then we can be the ones to actually step in front of that wave of wealth and help direct that in the proper areas and locations. Anyway, I just wanted to share that because it completely, market is showing exactly what you're talking about is
And very encouraging.
That's exciting.
well, when he was sharing earlier, I'm like, actually, I'm very optimistic. It just sticks in my mind.
Kapoor BC out of San Francisco just released a report that their funds, because they focused the last 3 years, they've shifted to social impact. Investing heavily. I mean, they were top investors in the private market, Uber, and they're in the top 25 percentile of their funds have shown growth.
In that impact space.
In the impact space. So they had a report that just released not too long ago, maybe like a week or two, stating that exact thing, showing like, hey, VC firm, like, hey, everyone, it can work.
Yeah. That's exciting. I'm so excited.
I have some slides I'll send to you to share.
Cool. Awesome. Anyone have anything else?
Last question.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
So I'm curious about, I've seen that before, the equity pricing and all that.
Yeah.
How does that work, like logistically?
Not sure.
Okay.
I promise you it'll be great. Anyone else? Cool. I love you. Thank you for listening to me. Let's do something much more social and much less structured.
Thanks for taking the painful time to birth that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for
20-hour days.
receiving my gestation, for being my doulas. All right.